Hello and welcome to another edition of the Mayor Dan Paletko Show. I'm very pleased to have as my guests our two local judges in the 20th District Court, Judge Turfe and Judge Plawecki. Thank you so much for being my guests today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Mayor.
Now, you change periodically. One of you has got like a higher judgeship or presiding judge. Is that the proper term?
Well, yes. Because it's a multi-judge court, we do have to have one person making decisions, and it's my turn this year to be the chief judge in the 20th District Court. But if truth be told, all decisions made in the 20th District Court are made between Judge Plawecki and I, so it's just a title only.
And I will tell you, as a mayor, and it's great that you two work well together. I know that in one of the neighboring courts there have been constant battles, and we've not had that. We've had two great judges that work together and for the betterment of the community and do your job, and I think that's great.
A smart person always take the advice of the senior judge. So,
well, we were lucky that Judge Foreign was the judge when I started, and we had the same type relationship. So I've been chief, I think, 10 of the 20 years, and again, as Judge Turfe stated, it's we rule by consensus. Neither one of us makes a major decision administratively without consulting the other.
And Judge Plawecki, what's a little bit about your background? You kind of went locally to school, and
yes, I graduated from Riverside when it was a high school, and then got my degree from Michigan State, and then stayed up in Lansing and worked in state government while I was going to Cooley Law School. Mm-hmm. So, and then I practiced. Ironically, we both practiced in Macomb County as a base. When I say Judge Turfe did in St. Clair Shores, and I was in New Baltimore. And then when the opening arose, I ran in '94.
Mm-hmm. So, Judge Turfe, what's your background? You're a local boy too, right?
Basically, right next door to Dearborn. I was born and raised in Dearborn. I graduated from Dearborn Fortson in 1982, and we've been in the Heights since 1982. Right. I went to Henry Ford Community College for a couple of years, then to Wayne State, and then I was fortunate enough to go be accepted in the Detroit College of Law, where Comerica Park is right now. Every time I go to Comerica Park, I think about my law schools. Every time a Tiger hits a home run, I'm thinking about my law school.
And he's a Spartan now.
That's right. I'm a what is a de facto Spartan, by default, I guess. But I'm proud to be as well too. And so and then I did practice I was a general practitioner. My office was based in Macomb County, and I was fortunate enough to be elected judge in 2006. I was elected judge, and I did as you remember, Mayor. I was fortunate enough to get experience by yourself as sitting as a colleague of yours as a city council member in 2009, in 2000 and 2001.
Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons we complement each other, I think, is he had a major civil practice, whereas I was a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney primarily, and Judge Foreign had been a civil attorney. So, we feed off each other in that respect.
Well, it definitely, the courts operate very well. Can you explain to the viewers, like, what kind of cases do you both have presented before you versus, let's say, a Wayne County Circuit Court judge? Or would you have similar cases?
Well, we handle, in criminal matters, we handle both criminal and civil. In criminal matters, we hear all the misdemeanors, so circuit wouldn't hear those. And we hear the felony preliminary hearings. So if a felony is committed in the city, then we hear a preliminary exam, and then if there's enough evidence to bind the case over, then it goes to circuit court. And then as far as the civil jurisdiction, our cases are up to $25,000.
Okay. And
then anything above that is filed in circuit.
So you have landlord-tenant, those kind of things?
Landlord-tenant, small claims. From a practical standpoint in a criminal matter, all criminal matters start in the city where the crime occurs, whether it's a felony or a misdemeanor. So it would start in Dearborn Heights. So if there was a murder, God forbid, in Dearborn Heights, it would start in Dearborn Heights. We would determine if there was probable cause that a crime was committed and probable cause that the defendant committed the crime. If we believe there is, then we ship it downtown. But all misdemeanors, which is sentencing up to a year, would stay in our court.
So I guess for both of you, what is the most memorable court case that you've had that, let's say, that the general public, that there was just an array of publicity about? Maybe Judge Turfe first.
We had about a year and a half ago. We had that case. We don't like to have cases like that, first and foremost, Mayor, because
Right.
it's we don't like to have murder cases and stuff like that.
Yeah, we don't want
our
them in the city.
Absolutely, and I got to tell you, it's a credit to yourself and the police department because our city's been relatively free of those types of capital cases. But we did have one about a year and a half ago where the young lady knocked on one of our residents' doors in Dearborn Heights at 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. The resident opened up the door and shot her. And then he was charged with first-degree murder.
Mm-hmm.
And that exam, it got national attention, national news, and the exam was held in our court, and we did bind the defendant over on the charges, and I think eventually he was convicted of second-degree murder in the circuit court. What made that case interesting, and I know Judge Plawecki can elaborate a little bit, was did he, why did he shoot her? He opened up the door, shot her. There was a scream between him and her, and so it just brought out a lot of questions, and the jury made the decision that he committed a wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And that case had so much notoriety that even at the arraignment, which I did, David handled the exam. There was the Los Angeles Times and the Wall Street Journal, and I had relatives in California saying, "Oh, we just saw your name in the paper for this." So that was a tragedy, no question.
Mm-hmm. So that was the most memorable one, or did you?
In recent.
Yeah. I unfortunately had the exam when the serial killer, John Armstrong, this was back in 2000, was with a prostitute, and he killed her and dumped the body in the Rouge River in the Heights. So then they found out that he had committed as many as 30. Now, I don't know if they verified all 30, but they verified at least 5. He had been in the Navy for 8 years, so these acts were committed throughout the world. And he's, of course, the case was bound over, and he was convicted in Wayne Circuit, and he's serving life without parole.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are definitely. Now, one of the questions that periodically we have a traffic department, and they issue traffic tickets. Do those go to? They don't go directly to two of you. They go to a magistrate. How does that all work?
That's correct. We have a system in the 20th District Court, which we think it's a great system actually. They can when somebody does get a ticket, they can walk in and address it directly with the magistrate, or they can set up an informal hearing, whereby they will set it up with the magistrate, but at a particular time. And the third option is to have a formal hearing, whereby they can come in on their own or with a lawyer, and discuss the matter with the city attorney or the prosecuting attorney, depending if it's a state ticket or a local ticket. Mm-hmm. And so they have that opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm. That's if there's one ticket, and that's usually the case. But if a person's pulled over, say, for a misdemeanor, and then, or is pulled over for, say, disobeying a stoplight, stop sign, or red light, then we will hear the misdemeanor and the civil infraction at arraignment in our courtrooms. Mm-hmm. Those are the times we typically hear them initially.
Mm-hmm. Of course, the fourth option is to admit guilt and pay the ticket.
Well, that's true. But as you know, Mayor, everybody doesn't want to do that because then the insurance goes sky high.
Yeah. That is that situation. And the other thing is because sometimes people will talk about the penalties, but the legislature has tacked on a lot that when I tell people, so they go, wow, $165. And I go, probably almost half that is all going to Lansing, and people are shocked.
This is true. This is true, especially on civil infractions. It breaks it down and how much goes here, how much goes there, and how much goes there. Even on misdemeanors, there's crime victim rights fee and state court fees, which is $75 and $50 respectively, that go directly to the state. It doesn't come to us.
On nearly every case.
Every case, every misdemeanor case. They just changed the law about 2-3 years ago. Where it used to be certain ones, but now
Right.
it's every misdemeanor case. Even on a no insurance, which is a misdemeanor, you still have to pay that $125.
Yeah, I felt we ought to get that point because people think that, and it really, this is not at all intended. If I thought it was for revenue generating, I mean, we would all be extremely mad, but some of the areas I've talked to some of the officers, traffic, and I said, why are you watching this area? And some of them will tell me, well, I went to a traffic accident there 6 months ago in which a person died, and I don't want to see somebody else pass away. And so that's where I center my focus on trying to get people to drive within the speed limits.
Mayor, you said something that's very, very important and that the audience should know. And I can speak for Judge Plawecki when I say this, is that we do not sentence people based upon the revenue it's going to generate for the city. Okay? We do not do that.
Mm-hmm.
That's not our policy. That's not our criteria. And so the people need to know that.
I'm glad you said that because that is not, too many, and that's been the common thing that people sit there and say, well, they just are doing it to generate revenue. And it is not. It's not.
Absolutely not.
If everybody kept within the confines of the law, then officers couldn't write tickets. They wouldn't go to the judge. So, or the court, I should say, not necessarily to the judge. Well, let's switch a little bit. One of the things that I wanted to focus on is I hear from a lot of your colleagues all the time that one of the important aspects of being a good citizen in the United States is when you're called for jury duty to show up and to perform that function. Could you elaborate on why that's so important?
Quite frankly, our system would break down without the citizens performing their constitutional right to a jury trial. Because everybody has a right to a jury trial on any misdemeanor or felony case, and even on a civil case if they do pay the civil jury fee. They have a right to a jury trial. In a misdemeanor, you have 6 jurors, and in a felony, you have 12 jurors. But in our court particularly, you have 6 jurors. And if they don't show up for jury trial, we can't have a jury. We can't have a trial. And so just the system would break down. And in our city, I got to tell you, and Judge Plawecki can elaborate a little bit more on that, is the citizens have been very, very, very cooperative in coming to jury duty. And the ones that don't, quite frankly,
We show cause.
yeah, and Judge Plawecki can elaborate on that as well, too.
No, I think overall the system has worked very well. I know they've had some problems in Wayne County, but our residents have been by and large superb in this area. And as Judge Turfe states, our system couldn't exist if they didn't take the time. They're taking the time out of busy schedules to come down, but typically they do. And one thing, like I hate to have cases settle on the day of trial because it's almost like you waste the jurors' times.
Yep.
But sometimes there's no other way to get a plea. And once, we say we're ready to go, the jurors are here, magically sometimes you find out there's
most of the time,
sometimes.
Push comes to shove.
Yeah, and that's what happened, I think, in my case when I was called for jury duty, and I went downtown, and I was in this big room with, 500 people. It seemed like a lot. And then we were all called up, and that's what I think happened when the attorney knew that, hey, they got a jury pool here, we're ready to hold the case, and then they reached some kind of a agreement, and the person pleaded guilty to something. But I hear that from Wayne County judges, not so much from both of you, but I just wanted to establish that it's extremely important that people go. And actually, most of the people that have gone through the process, they come back and they found it exciting, fascinating. They really were glad they went.
Well, they're like judges.
Yeah.
They're deciding the case, and they're deciding whether you're guilty or not guilty, so they're like judges.
Right, and you don't have to serve once you're 70, but I've had people in their late 70s who come and they say, I wanted to be here, so found that interesting.
And after the Simpson case, I think all of us were that were not attorneys were so fascinated by it. So I think it was after that case, everybody sidebar became the word. No one had ever heard what a sidebar was, I think, until that case, and so that was the public. I want to just encourage them to participate.
Well, they should, and just to close the subject, Mary, if they don't appear, unfortunately, we do show cause them, meaning that we sent them a letter asking them, why didn't you come, and we bring them to court. And most of them have good reasons why they
Good
don't come.
excuses.
Yeah. So.
But they can be found in contempt.
That's right.
Suffer the consequences.
What would be the consequences? Would that be a fine or?
Fine, maybe work program.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yes. So depending on the response that they give us.
Well, I remember sitting next to a woman in this big poll room when I went down, and she said she thought they were picking the jurors based upon when you showed up and registered, because you had to be there before 9. And so she said, well, so we were talking, and then I learned that her and the other woman that was listening to us both had not shown up, so they got pulled first for the jury duty, and where it was my first time to be called, so I didn't get through all this thing. By the time I got called, it was almost 2:00 in the afternoon. So it was towards the end, but it looked like those who didn't show, they made sure they got picked first for the jury duty, at least downtown. So that's what I learned. Both of you are involved in other things. Judge Turfe, you're active in youth sports, and
yes,
to your credit. And maybe give us a little bit of things that you do. You've done coaching.
I love to coach baseball, and I love to coach basketball, although my learned colleague here is a baseball genius and guru, writes books about it, and he can tell you, the trainers from the 1933 Chicago Cubs teams. But I do like to coach baseball, and I still play baseball. I play softball, although it's hard for me to touch my knees, let alone my ankles anymore. But I do play softball in a 40 and over league, and I do coach. Although this year I'm not coaching, but hopefully we're gonna try and pick it up again next year. But I've coached for 10, 15 years. I like to do community work, community service with the Kiwanis Club and the Lions Club. We do the Good Fellows, and we do a lot of the peanut sales and stuff like that. I like to get out and do things like that.
And Judge,
You've heard the expression "good field, no hit."
Yeah.
He's just the opposite. I'll let the viewers
really
contemplate that. Yeah. Those are the reports.
Judge, you just talked about baseball. You just authored another baseball book?
No, actually, I did write one a few years back on pitchers, and I had a formula for ranking pitchers. But this more recent one was a collection of my columns that I write for the Detroit Legal News.
Okay.
And then I updated all the columns in 2013, so the book came out last year. So it's actually at the Caroline Kennedy Library.
Okay.
So.
Well, that'd be something for
Amazon.
Reviews to look at. You're on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or not?
Amazon and through the publisher, Word Association.
Well, then you can get it through Barnes & Noble, too.
Sure.
Because once you get through that, well, that's great. So, I don't know how many people knew your authorship, but you actually had Ernie Harwell, I think, was a big proponent of your pitching statistic.
Ernie was very gracious when he got the book and called me, and then did talk about it for a short period of time. This was back in '06, but I was contacted last fall by the Chicago White Sox, because the name of the book was "How Could You Trade Billy Pierce?" And Billy Pierce was on the Veterans Committee, so I did a radio program trying to enhance his candidacy for the Hall of Fame, which he didn't get in, but I think he deserves to be, no question.
That's fascinating. Judge Turfe, you were telling me recently, I think our viewers would be interested, but there was a state administrator survey or study that they did of the 20th District Court, and how did you guys do?
The State Court Administrator's Office oversees the court system primarily in Michigan. They do a survey of the courts, district courts, circuit courts, and they did a survey in the 20th District Court. And I'm proud to say, and it's a tribute to to the staff, the administration, the employees, the personnel, everybody in the whole court system. We exceeded every average in the state.
Good.
In fact, she marveled, Deborah Green, who's our state court administrator for our region, was very proud and pleased of how we performed. And it's categories such as timeliness in the cases, friendliness in the court, accessibility to certain things, and how fast your case got settled, and the demeanor of the judges and the magistrates, and the whole gambit. We exceeded every single category that they surveyed. So we're very proud of that. And that, again, that's a tribute to our staff and everybody in the court.
Well, it's a nice tribute to both of you, and also that our voters have selected the two of you to be our judges. Sometimes when I've gone to meetings with other mayors and I hear situations that they have within their court system, and I say, I got two great judges, a great court system, and we all get along real well. I find that that's not always the case everywhere around the state, so we're very blessed to have both of you as judges and the great job that you guys are doing.
We're lucky to have an administrator like Michelle Atkins and a deputy administrator like Barb Blunt, who've been there many years, both around 20, and our magistrates, Don Rivard and Yvonne Abraham, because, you hire good people, they make you look good.
Yeah, it's a team effort. So
it is, and especially to yourself, Mayor, and the rest of the city council, who oversee you approve our budget. Mm-hmm. And so so we're very thankful that you allow us the flexibility to go ahead and do what we have to do within obviously the purview of the budget of the whole city.
It's worked out extremely well. So we've not had any. We're not making headlines in the press, which we don't want to do.
No, we don't.
But that's the key. That good cooperative spirit is what allows us, the whole system, to operate and operate well.
Do we have time for the historical?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Because we are a court of limited jurisdiction, the district court. District courts came into being by statute from the legislature in 1968. So we're going on half a century. And we've had 9 judges in Dearborn Heights. We've always been a 2-judge court. Of course, Judge Foran was there the longest, 34 years. And but the first 2 judges, Richard Dunn and George Wicklund, were intimately involved at the beginning of the city. Yep. The suit which Dearborn Heights was brought against the city in order to stop it from becoming one. As you know, we had a north end and a south end, but we didn't have any connection. And Michigan law states municipalities have to be contiguous. So the strip from Cherry Hill to Annapolis, Gully to Beach Daly was proposed to be taken, and the residents in that area and throughout the city voted, I think, over 60% to become a city. Well, the village of Inkster sued the Wayne County Board of Supervisors, saying you can't take a part of our village without our say-so, and this was like 1960. And if the law read, if it had been annexed or consolidated, they would have been right. But the circuit judge ruled because it was a new city, only the residents in that part of the proposed city could vote, and they voted to uphold it. It did go to the Supreme Court, and this is before the 1963 Constitution. So back then, the Supreme Court had 8 justices. What happened? 4-4. They ruled, in baseball, tie goes to the runner. In this case, tie went to the lower court ruling, and that's how we became a city.
Yeah, kind of adding to that, I wondered if the original city fathers, and I had the opportunity to know all of them very well, why they didn't go farther south, across Van Born. And they indicated that they had received from some residents a desire to go what is now I-94 up to the expressway limit, which would have given us Masco Corporation also as a taxpayer. But now Masco's apparently moving to Livonia. But they told me that they had done a survey in that area, and they were afraid it would not pass, and no, at that point, no one was doing the kind of polling that's done now.
Right.
And they were scared that that could have just toppled the whole thing in a negative. And there was the difficulty with Inkster looking to incorporate, and so all those time constraints. And so they decided not to go on the other side of Van Born. But I heard that from Bob McLaughlin and John Canfield.
But if we'd gone from Joy further south than Van Born, that's more than 6 miles, right? Aren't they kind of limited 6 by 6? I thought.
You may be right. They didn't mention that, but the story they told me was that they had some people getting petitions down on the other side of Van Born.
Maybe they're going to chop off anything north of Warren.
Yeah.
Who knows?
I mean, it was the one thing I'm proud that I had an opportunity was to serve with and get to know Richard Young, who I considered to be a mentor of mine, as your cousin Dave Plawecki, who I always felt was like a brother. But your John Canfields, your Bob McLaughlins, and some of those early leaders. And it was always fascinating as they told me, like Dick Young always told me, the City Hall is where it is. It was originally going to be built off a telegraph, but then they did some soil borings and they found out it would cost $12,000 more to secure the foundation. So that's when the building authority decided to move, and they swapped some land with Crestwood and others. And so the City Hall is inside because they didn't need the extra $12,000 for the caissons and stuff for the foundation. And so when Dick Young told me the story, he said, yeah, I was the only one who voted against Mayor Canfield, John Canfield, and the rest of the board, because I thought it should be built on telegraph and we ought to pay the $12,000. And he goes, for 6 months, John Canfield didn't talk to me, so he told me the story.
$12,000.
But I never quite. And there's I think Bill's Drain that goes under, because when you go down telegraph, it dips, and that was part of the consideration. So some of those early history things. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, Wickland had represented in that suit Canfield and McCarthy. Now, wasn't McCarthy on the first council?
McCarthy,
or was he
I believe, was the first council president.
Right.
Yes.
And was Canfield, before he was mayor, because he was the first mayor in '63, was he like the supervisor
He
before
was the
that?
supervisor and beat a gentleman who lived on Outer Drive, who was the supervisor for him, Bullock.
Okay.
And when I was out campaigning for council, I went to Mr. Bullock's door, and he was so cordial. He had me sit on the front porch in Outer Drive, and he told me all these terrific stories, and until he passed away. So I learned another aspect, but John Canfield became the supervisor, and then the city was formed, and he then was the first mayor. So, yeah, quite an interesting history. And I remember Judge Wickland, and Judge Dunn, of course, became a circuit court judge.
Became chief judge of Wayne Circuit.
And we were always very proud. Back in those days, people smoked, and I never saw Judge Dunn without a cigarette holder. Do you remember that, or are you too young?
No, I don't remember.
I'd never seen anybody, I mean, it was popular for people to smoke, but he always had like a cigarette holder, an attachment to the cigarette.
All the employees used to smoke at their stations in the old building.
Well, that'll never happen today.
No, I mean.
You said Supreme Court. Just so the viewers know, we do have roots in this Michigan Supreme Court.
Yes.
Judge Zara, who has roots here in Dearborn Heights. I believe Judge Kelly, Mary Beth Kelly.
They both grew up very close to one another.
So we must be a breeding ground for the Supreme Court justices.
For one of you, you might be on the next holder of the Michigan Supreme Court justice. The Supreme Court would do well with either one or both of you.
Thank you very much.
With that, we're going to close, but thank you, judges, for being on a guest on my show. And for the viewers, I want to thank you for watching another Mayor Dan Paletko Show.